My name's Aidan White. I'm a member of the Labour Party in Forest Gate South, and I'm also the publisher and editor-in-chief of Newham Voices, which is the new community newspaper. I hope you're all enjoying it. We're trying to very slowly introduce a new form of communications, which is community-based in Newham, and very slowly we're getting off the ground. I'm very happy to say that we've started regular monthly publication from this month, and we're going to be touching on slightly a different way of treating the important issues which everybody knows about. I know quite a lot of you on this call already, but it's very good of you all to sort of join. And I've been asked if I can chair tonight's debate. It's a rather strange debate, unfortunately, because it's rather one-sided in the sense that we've reached out to Newham Right to Vote, who are very much in favour of maintaining the directly elected mayoral position, because we thought it would be very useful for us to have an open debate about the pros and cons of that system of local governance. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to formally to be able to join us, which is a pity. But the Newham Voting for Change group want to really proceed, and I think that's right. They've put up a wonderful speaker, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Book is going to be sort of speaking for them. The idea was originally to have two speakers from either side, and then have a little jousting and some questions being asked. That's not going to happen. But I hope what we will be able to do tonight, with Elizabeth's help and the help of all of you, is to really sort of tease out some of the really critical questions. The fact of the matter is, this issue is a really complicated one. I have to say, and I'm think if we walk the streets of Newham, we won't find people arguing between themselves over whether or not to have an elected mayor or not. It's not the most important issue on people's minds at the moment, and with good reason, because there's a terrible crisis which is going on, and very much it just adds a new layer of complexity to the difficulties that people are facing. But it is important because it is to do with how Newham is governed, and it also touches upon, you know, for the next 10 years, how people will be able to influence the process of local government. Now, before we start, I really, we'd like to record this if it's possible. So if anyone doesn't want to have it recorded, just let us know, because we won't record it if there's serious objections. My view about it is if we can record it, it's good, because I think a way of recording what people have got to say about this issue and perhaps actually disseminating that is really, really useful. There's not been enough serious discussion and talk about it, and I think the more that can be done, the better. But are you happy with the idea of recording the meeting? Very good. Thanks very much. I'll take that. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much indeed. So what I was proposing to do is I'm going to ask Elizabeth to speak. She'll speak for a few minutes. Because we don't have another side of the argument, I'm as the chair. I'll invite you to pose some questions to her, which I hope will take her to task over some of the assertions she's going to make about the democratic benefits that there are in the committee system. And if you don't do it, then I will, because in Newham Voices this month, you'll see that there is a bit of a detailed letter from Charlene McLean on behalf of the Newham Right to Vote, outlining some of the arguments. And I think really some of those arguments are worth putting and are worth answering more than anything. So, you know, that's how we'll go. And after that, it'll be an open season. I'll be asking you all to pose questions about what you think about this issue, about about how it's best to approach it. And you can pose those questions either in the chat, or you can ask them directly if you just indicate who you are and where you want to speak. If you can identify yourself and where you're from when you ask questions or you make a point, please do that as well, because it's always helpful. I'm grateful to Josephine, who is busily sort of organizing and hosting this meeting, and thanks to her for making sure that it works technically. But anyway, I hope that we'll have a good discussion. We're planning to do it for about another 55 minutes. So let's have a good discussion. Elizabeth, how would you like to kick off the discussion by giving us an absolutely convincing summary of the good arguments that there are for booting the mayoral system into touch? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Aidan. I don't know that I'm wanting to give an argument for booting it into touch, but I do want to give kind of a positive argument for the committee system. Newham is one of only 15 local authorities out of 343 in England and Wales to have a directly elected mayor. And yet we hear arguments from the pro-directly elected mayor campaign that sound as though it is our long fought for right to elect the leader of our council. And on the surface, this can feel very appealing. One person accountability. We can see their face, know who to cheer or boo for the waxing and waning of the local authority's fortunes. But this kind of strong person leadership should be something that a progressive local authority is ready to leave behind. The committee model ensures all councillors who we have all voted for have a real role to play. It's important not only as a question of how we function, but who we are as a council. No one person can represent Newham in all its wonderful diversity. Neither can one person have a good enough handle on every element of council business in order to have executive powers over it. At the moment, this is achieved through heavily relying on unelected officials and a cabinet chosen by the mayor. This narrows the diversity of thought and experience to a few who are directly accountable to the mayor. The committee model ensures that all councillors play an active role in policy formation. This is important because it is about who we are. 66 councillors can represent a borough. They can represent a borough well. One mayor simply cannot. We currently have a model that de-skills councillors. And I know that that sounds harsh, but it does not expect effective contributions by ensuring that the majority of councillors have little to no power outside of asking questions and being on scrutiny panels. When we're told that the councillors do not turn up to committees, I don't think, oh goodness, committees don't work. I think the system is broken. We should not put all our hopes on a strong leader whose policies I may agree with today, but who knows about tomorrow. We should be empowering all councillors to play their role. Councillors who are just as accountable to us as any mayor could be. We aren't asking you to vote to lose the right to vote, which is as oxymoronic as it sounds. We are asking you to vote for cooperative leadership, for bringing the expertise, diverse experience and backgrounds of all the elected councillors to bear, for transparency of decisions being made in open committees rather than cabinet meetings, and for collective leadership. As Mayor Roxana Fayez said in her campaign literature in 2018, the directly elected mayoral model is broken in Newham. I agree. Let's vote for change.
Thank you very much indeed. Elizabeth, I mean, I think that really sort of sets out how we should see it. I think you've put forward some very, very strong arguments. And I'm of the view that they're very good. And I think John Whitworth articulated some of those arguments in his article in Newham Voices last month as well. I wonder if I can ask you a couple of questions, really, just to sort of start the ball rolling, because I think, and this isn't a question that comes from the Newham Right to Vote group, actually. This is a question which I think genuinely concerns a lot of people. And that is that because Newham is effectively, and the opposition always say this, it's a one-party state. Because Newham has Labour councils all the way, it doesn't have any ideological contrary voices being heard within the leadership. And it may well be that the question of the committee system would work and could work, but doesn't it work best when there is real opposition around on the council, when there are real people who've got a political following who challenge the orthodoxy of the main political party? And isn't this a profound weakness that Newham has, which means that the committee system will be weakened, and that any opportunity that the people of Newham have to directly influence how the borough is governed is to be welcomed? So don't you think there is a massive problem in Newham because of the lack of an elected voice to counter the massive support that there is for the Labour Party and dominance of the Labour Party within the borough?
Thank you, Aidan. Yes, but I think that we should have a system that is capable of doing the thing that we want it to do. So that is a problem for both the committee and the mayoral system. There are huge pitfalls to the fact that there is only one party at the moment in power. So for example, with us choosing our mayor, we don't really choose our mayor. A very small number of Labour members choose the Labour candidate, and then the Labour candidate is elected. Saying that having a directly elected mayor within a one-party borough is more accountable just isn't the case, because the Labour person will be the person that's elected. So it's kind of just a bit of a straw man argument. But also I think that we should have a model that is best suited to cooperative working, so that we can have a borough that when it does have other councillors from other parties, that there is a real way that they can actually be part of policy making, rather than having a system where even if certain wards started to have other parties, they still wouldn't have any say within council, because the mayor would be able to still hold the majority and appoint people of the same party. So it seems like it's a wrong way round question. Perhaps we don't have the best system at the moment. We don't have the best situation at the moment in Newham with having all Labour, but actually the better system is the committee system. So let's have the committee system and then try and change the situation rather than the other way around.
But the argument is that the committee system leads to more infighting and factions and factionalizing within the administration.
So I think that that's an interesting thing that I also read within the article. I think that we're working very much on a position of fear, that for some reason we don't believe that we can work together. I think that that's part of the de-skilling that I spoke about, that actually we have set up a system that allows people to not, sorry, I can see the chat and it's slightly distracting me, that we have set up a system that doesn't encourage working together. We've set up a system that encourages people trying to form factions in order to gain power, in order to then affect the broader way that the council works. Actually, if we were a cooperative system, there would be less need for that sort of factionalism anyway. And also Labour is a broad church. I have to say that's something that I think that would be able to flourish more, and more diversity of opinion even within the same borough would be able to flourish more if everybody had some power, rather than one person having power and everybody else having to fit in with that one person.
But is it really one person having power? Don't councillors have influence, direct influence, don't they? And you say that the cabinet is unelected? I'm not sure that's the case. I think many members of the cabinet are elected people. And so
I didn't say that they were unelected.
Unfortunately, I think you did, but it doesn't matter. It's all right. We'll check through the record. But I think you did, and they, of course, they're elected. And it's really quite important that we recognise, and I think you do recognise that the cabinet itself is a formulation which is rather like the committee system in one way. In another regard, isn't the real problem with your argument is that you're against what would appear to be the cult of the individual, the cult of the mayor, the single person, rather than the body of work that can be carried out in that particular way. And I think, aren't we talking also perhaps not about this mayor, but previous mayors? Aren't we talking about a legacy and a history that we're having to deal with now? And isn't that one of the problems that we have to deal with?
I'm sorry, you've asked quite a few questions in one there.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I'll attempt to remember all of them though. So is my argument against the cult of the individual? Yes, is the answer. I don't think that a strong man, woman, person leadership is the right way to go. I think that, you know, there's been particularly a lot of looking globally around different forms of government, and that actually cooperative governments and cooperative leadership works well. So the answer is yes, I am anti the cult of the individual. I think it's a really good point that you make to do with legacy, and that's what I actually think that one of the things that I think is really short-sighted is that people are on one side or the other, on both sides, because they care or don't care about the individual who's in power. I actually think that if we believe in cooperative working, if we believe in power distributed as a way of governance, then the person at the top isn't the person that's important. You know, it's not about whether we want that individual or not, it's whether we want the structure or not. And having so much power concentrated in one or a very few hands means that actually if I disagree with their politics today, I might agree with the next person's, and then I might disagree with the next person's. It's not about that, it's about wanting distributed power. Thanks,
that's helpful. Animal has been really patient, so I'm going to ask him if he wants to ask a question. Unmute yourself, Animal, and tell us a bit about where you're from.
Oh, hi, Aidan. Thanks for chairing this meeting. I was originally supposed to be part of the panel, but I had other commitments, but I managed to jump in. And I don't want to go into any, repeat anything that Elizabeth has said, and I don't want to take up too much time. But what I want to add with reference to what one of the other key issues that we have with this executive mayoral system is actually its cabinet. It's not just that one person is holding so much power, because a strong leader can also hold similar power after the changes in legislation of Localism Act, I think 2011. Strong leader and executive mayors have similar power. The difference is strong leader is elected selected by his councillor following an election, and an executive mayor is directly elected by the public. But the executive mayor elected by a public to run a council that is governed by something that is deemed autocratic. So we've got an autocratic governance system through a democratic mean, or some may say a more democratic mean, by allowing the public to vote. Now, the next point I'm going to make is it's not so much that the executive mayor is wields so much power, and it's not so much that they can be a cult personality. I mean, I think it may have been the case in the past previous administration, according to some. But the fundamental issue here that I think we should focus on and not lose focus off, we shouldn't take focus away from, is that it's cabinet system. It's the cabinet system. I personally wouldn't mind the public voting for a mayor if it's just a directly elected mayor, not an executive one, and if it had a committee mod system as a governing structure underneath. it. But somehow Tony Blair forgot to put that in the legislation. They only put two options, a strong leader and a cabinet, and an executive mayor and a cabinet. He forgot to put something in there as a elected mayor and a committee system on the ballot. If that was the case, I would probably gone for that. At the moment, we don't have that in legislation. So I would opt for a leader and a committee system, which I think is a more an inclusive structure. I mean, I don't want to echo everything that Liz has said, and people should understand the difference between a cabinet system and a committee system. I'm taking the focus away from the executive mayor because me personally don't think it's about a personality or a cult. It's more about the system, that system that is in place. And the committee system structure, you have all those current cabinet structure, they are going to be elected directly by the elected councillors who and the committees. After we've got the elected chairs, we have the elected vice chairs, then we have another probably 9 people committee who will be scrutinizing the decisions and who will be involved in those directly in those decisions, overseeing the issue or the concerns. And guess what? In those committees, you will have relevant community, say it's a cyclist lobby, they can send representative on an environmental issue and they can sit on those committees, be actively involved. We can have Comrade Lewis Godfrey in that committee because I know he loves his environment, and so do I, by the way. I'm a fellow cyclist. But we can have him on the committee rather than just send it to the cabinet or the executive mayor. Just come up with a decision. Voila, we've got LTN. Voila, we've got this, no discussion. Because I believe I made the right decision. Sometimes the mayor will make good decisions. Other times she might not make the good decision, but what we are saying is we want those decisions to be made in an inclusive, democratic, more democratic fashion. In a committee structure, you can have that. In a cabinet system, we're talking about, cabinets are being elected. They may have been elected by the, I noted that, Lewis. But in the cabinet, what you have is a cabinet system where you will find a strong leader or the executive mayor making those appointments, not the 66 councillors choosing who's the best candidate to do that job.
I mean, I think
in a cabinet system, you don't have extra 9 people on those committees taking responsibilities and taking a role of doing research, or maybe in a committee system, people are delegated responsibilities as well. And you have a community groups who will be part of that decision-making process, whereas it's just a cabinet member with the officers doing what they need to do. I know Ruxana has set up citizen assemblies, but those citizen assemblies don't cover everything. And in those citizen assemblies,
I mean,
you'll have.
I want to come on to that if I can in a minute, because I think
Aidan.
I want to ask Lewis if he's got something to add so far, because one of the things I wanted to say is that one of the things that Roxana has done is to try to become more inclusive in terms of reaching out to the people of Newham. And although we may have various views about how they operate and so on, the idea of citizens' assemblies, the idea of local hubs, the creation of youth hubs, the sort of attempt to reach out to various groups within the disparate sort of community that makes up Newham, seems to me to be genuinely sort of spreading a level of democracy which is much needed, and gets away from that sort of centralized exercise of power. That's a very strong, I think that's a very strong argument about how a mayor using their power can in fact enhance democratic participation at the lowest level. And I think it's something that really one ought to be sort of clear about in terms of what we may win or what we may lose in terms of this vote. Lewis, you wanted to say something.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Aidan, thanks, Animal, and thanks, Elizabeth. I thought you made some great points. I just really want to ask Elizabeth a question. I think you remember we might have had a conversation about it on Twitter, but I've recently torn my calf, which is why I wasn't out campaigning this weekend. And I ended up going to the physio today, actually a couple of hours ago. And he said I might have to have surgery. Now, Elizabeth, do you reckon I would be better off being operated on by a professional surgeon who's paid to do surgery all day, has years of experience performing surgery? Or do you reckon I should get the surgery done by a committee of 5 plucky maverick amateur surgeons who, whilst perfectly amiable to each other in their day-to-day job as respectively a buy-to-let landlord, a union rep, a retired teacher, a buy-to-let landlord and a buy-to-let landlord, never seem to agree with each other when they're actually operating on patients, and have gained most of their knowledge of surgical procedures either from once being operated on themselves or from watching repeats of Diagnosis Murder on a Sunday morning?
So I think, first of all, you're overestimating the experience of your surgeon in this analogy, in terms of putting it to the governance model, that actually the mayor is usually previously a councillor. So one of these people that you're also putting into the section of being, you know, a maverick, plucky person, you know, that's who most of the, you know, the mayor isn't necessarily someone with much more expertise than any of those. And you're correct that they do get paid full time in order to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the breadth of expertise in order to run it that you would hope that they would. They haven't necessarily come from having run other local authorities, which would give them good experience, as you would hope that your surgeon had previously operated on other carves. So I think that you're overestimating the experience of the surgeon in this. And then I think that you're absolutely right about how you may characterise in some instances the plucky group of buy-to-let landlords and such. And actually, I think that that's a problem with the system. I think that the system enables that to happen and encourages people to not have to really engage with the process, not have to you know, read around the subjects that they're being given, because they don't have the responsibility. They're not holding the responsibility. You know, actually, if you give people more responsibility and you also have a system that enables good performance management, for example, then you're able to get a group of pretty well-versed, maybe semi-surgeons to be doing it. And that might be better than going for the guy that's never done your calf before, that's giving it a go, because they're being paid full time.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. There's a couple of good points in the chat I just wanted to point out. Tracy refers to problems of communication. And I think, you know, if you're going to communicate on complicated issues, the very least you can do is to be accurate and be fact-based in your communications above all. And I can understand why she might be a bit irritated by it, but I can also, I also accept the point that is being made in response to that, which is that, you know, as Daniel says, these may be people who have come lately to the committee system campaign, and maybe as a result of that, I've been playing fast and loose with the facts in terms of supporting it. And the question of the cabinet members and the question of the status of cabinet members, and it is true that if people can be sacked and they lose their job as a result of, you know, giving up time and effort in order to serve the community, we have to put in place ways of protecting them. We have to make sure that people don't suffer as a result of that. So I think that's a good point, that's well made. John, you wanted to say something, and then I'll come to John Whitworth and then Cecilia. John Saunders.
I'll unmute myself. Thank you, Aidan. I think the problem with a directly elected mayor is, first of all, there are no very limited number of checks and balances. It's not like the London mayor where you have the GLA with an elected, yes, there's always an opposition available in the GLA, and the same with the other metropolitan mayors. Local mayors are very, very different. In the Newham case, it's, as you've said, it's made far worse by the Labour Party being so popular. You can't blame the Labour Party for being popular, but unfortunately, it's not very helpful for democracy. And we've got to address that in some way when we win this campaign.
Yeah.
Well, the point I'd like to make is I was a councillor for 13 years and I served under a committee system, an executive system and a directly elected mayor. And with the directly elected mayor, the major problem was that all of the power, once you rewrite the constitution for the elected mayor, all the power is in the hands of one person for about 80% of the time. So the other councillors are always looking over their shoulder to see what the mayor thinks. If they want to do something on behalf of their constituents, their political future is dependent on doing something which the mayor approves of, or adapting it to do what the mayor approves of. And as a consequence, their local constituents' views are not always put in the forthright manner which they should be. And this is the question of patronage, really, where every councillor quite rightly wants to perform some sort of role. They want to sit on some sort of local committee, the health or education, or whatever it is. But if they misbehave, they get removed, just like that. By can be. I'm not saying every mayor is the same, but we did have an experience where a mayor was there for 16 years, and I think gradually all people behave the same. You have to have some way of restricting the mayor. Without the alternative vote, and with this position we have in Newham, there is these problems will continue.
John, can I
system? Some of them will be answered.
John, can I just come in and ask you, because just directly, and it's also just been pointed out now in the chat. Surely, if you have councils will have a leader. They will have a leader, whether it's the committee system or the mayoral system. There will be an identifiable leader. So the problem of patronage and people looking over their shoulders is the same, whether or not you have a committee system with an elected internal leader, or whether you have a mayor. So isn't that the case? Isn't that always the case?
No, if you have a committee system, let's say there was a committee for housing, the chair of that committee would not be elected not be imposed by the leader. It would be elected by the councillors who wanted to sit on that housing committee. So it is a very, very different situation. The power is spread between committees, between individuals, and when you're looking over your shoulder to see what you should be doing, you're looking at your constituents more often than you are at your colleagues. Both should happen, but your constituents suddenly become more important.
Right, thanks. So I'm going to move along now because we've got 3 or 4 people who want to speak. Cecilia.
Yeah, hi. I put a comment on the chat. I'm Cecilia from Bolin Ward, Labour Party member. I mean, I voted against the mayoral model in 2002, but I'm actually thinking about voting for it this time because I feel very anxious about this. Clearly 2 very different camps that are asking people to vote for a committee model. And one camp is promising all sorts of things that look unachievable. And my worry is, how will a committee model come to any sensible decisions when there's obviously such divisions in the council, and things are very split? And how will decisions be made in the interest of all of the people? So I can't see how that's going to happen.
I think that's a good question. I'm going to put that to one side and see if Elizabeth wants to pick that up towards the end of the discussion, because I think it's a really, really valuable question. John, you wanted to add? John Whitworth.
Yes, thank you, Aidan. Yeah, I think Elizabeth has done a great job answering the questions. I have got a couple of points to add to 2 of the questions that's been raised. One of them by yourself, because you said that the cabinet members are elected. Now, they are elected as councillors, the same as the other councillors, but they are appointed by the mayor, and this makes all the difference. Because even if you have collective decision making, as the current mayor has introduced, they're there because the mayor has put them there. And I do believe there is open discussion, but you're in a position where if you disagree too often on two important issues, the mayor with the power would be tempted to replace you with somebody who is a bit more amenable to the policies the mayor wishes to carry out. So they're not independent discussions, they're discussions among a group of people that have been appointed by the mayor, and of course with the allowances attached, special allowances to go with their appointment, and they can of course be dismissed by the mayor. So there is not free and open discussion in the cabinet. And the other point I was going to make, which actually has just been raised again, is about the cooperation under the committee model. Now, it's been interesting actually, as a councillor as I am in this latest council, which it's no secret that it's all Labour, but it is rather divided. And I think that's inevitable. When you have a group of 60 people, it's unhealthy if everybody has the same opinion. So there's divisions among the Labour members, as they would be members of different parties. And these are often, though not sometimes political, but often based on personality. We do find, unfortunately, there is a lot of conflict, to be honest, when we have meetings of the Labour group. But when we have committee meetings, we have meetings already for things like planning and scrutiny and so on. The committee system, of course, will bring in policy decision making in committees. That's the big difference. But the committees that already exist, we do find that people that tend to be quarrelsome in the General Assembly of the Labour group actually work together much more harmoniously when you put them in a committee of 6 or 8 people. And I think this is just experience shows that actually getting them together in a committee with a focus on a particular object, they work a lot better than when they are in a wider arena with wider forms of policy. So I'd just like to add those couple of points. Thank you.
Well, I think that last point is very good. The committee sees system as a peacemaking process. Yes. John, I think it's actually something that we should definitely sort of promote. I think that's a good idea. Michael Baker, you wanted to say something. You're muted, Michael. You're still muted. Is that a problem?
Sorry about that. I think I'm unmuted now, aren't I?
Yeah, you are.
Good, excellent. Thanks for that. I'm definitely a novice when it comes to local government, and I think probably the things that are being talked about here are quite technical in some ways, and quite high level. And I suppose, but from my perspective, I'd like to understand how the changes would maybe make material difference on a day-to-day basis. So I don't care whether there's a mayor or or local councillors making the decisions. I just want them to do it well, and I suspect very strongly that either model could work better or worse. And and I think I walk outside the front door and I see that there are some issues, and I'd like to know how a change like this could maybe make some of those things better. So if I give you one small example, which I think probably matters to most people, isn't necessarily the biggest issue in the world, but I think is important to most people in some way. The corner of my street, like the corner of a lot of streets, is piled high with rubbish that people seem to come from all around to dump all manner of bric-a-brac, and it's been like that for 10 years. And I've not seen so much as a sign going up there to say, don't dump rubbish here, it's illegal, you'll be fined if you do. And my instinct is that actually that type of issue must have been brought to the attention of local councillors any number of times. So the question that I ask myself is, is it that those local councillors are not doing a very good job? And I genuinely don't know the answer to that. Or is it that they lack powers? And I suspect very strongly that, that depending on what side of the debate that you're on, if you're an informed person, then one person will tell me one thing, and another will tell me another. But all I'd like to understand is how you think that that improvements can be made, you know, to how issues like that and other equally and more important issues might be addressed better by committee, and noting actually that I do, you know, probably share some of Lewis's concerns there expressed in his analogy, you know, because I do think that actually if the local councillors are, you know, kind of part-time and, you know, maybe not quite as committed as somebody who's, you know, in it, you know, fully, I wonder whether that might, you know, be a problem. Anyway, that's...
Thanks, Michael. Look, I mean, I think you raise a really important question, which goes to really to everybody, which is really in the end, perhaps we're making a bit of a fuss about this question of administration, because in the end, it actually comes down to the quality of people who are in the party, on the council, and in the leadership. And if you've got good quality people, they can make things work. And that's a very strong point. And it may well be that's one of the reasons why, as we've seen in the chat, there tends to be a sort of a feeling that generally that, you know, this is not a really very interesting subject for the people who are walking the streets of Newham, who live in Newham and are working in Newham and so on. It's not the sort of question that keeps them awake at night and so on. But I think you make a very good point, which I think is, it really gets to the heart of the question, is what we're talking about here is the quality of governance, the delivery of services that people want and need, an establishment of priorities that recognize what really is on people's minds and their concerns and so on. So I think that there's some very good points there. A couple of more people to speak. John Morris, you wanted to say something. No?
I do have one question. John Whitworth mentioned when councillors are interested in a particular committee, they would go for election to join that committee. So I just have one thought. What happens if certain committees are more popular than others, and you find that certain committees just can't find enough councillors to become members of them? And I do have a second question. I did have a debate with someone on this meeting actually about corruption. There have been cases, famously, Tower Hamlets with Lutfer Rahman, who's also in the news lately, Joe Anderson in Liverpool, and certain allegations against our last mayor here in Newham, versus how widespread it is within councillors and committees. So I guess there are two questions, and so what's the likelihood of corruption being involved if its powers more widespread in the committee system? And my last question, what happens when certain committees are more popular than others?
That's the sort of good technical questions, but they're good questions. I'm going to ask Jan if she would speak, because she hasn't spoken yet. And then I'll have a look around for others. I've got Animal and John Whitworth has still got his hand up. You want to speak again, John? Jan, it's to you.
Thank you very much. Addressing the last point and a couple of previous ones, actually, the quality of governance is incredibly important, and the ability of the committee system to hold the mayor and the committee chairs to account annually is really, really important. The trouble with the mayoral system is that, you know, we the people appoint somebody we don't really know based on a leaflet that's been put out, based on somebody who has been already selected by the Labour Party, actually, and by factions within the Labour Party, actually. But that one person gets elected. They then appoint their cabinet, who are paid, who are required to stand down their day job. And therefore, the minute they do something that doesn't fit with the mayor's pleasure, the mayor can sack them. that person therefore now has no day job and no cabinet resources. So that is a serious problem, and it meant that the accountability, the ability for corruption and secrecy within the system has now gone on for nearly 20 years. And yes, you're right, the person who brought up, it was blown big in Tower Hamlets. There's been a couple of good books about what went on under Robin Wells, and I'm nowhere accusing Roxana of that at all, not at all. But the ability to do so is there. That is the crucial issue. About who gets appointed to committees and whatever, they will still be appointed by the whip. So you'll show your preferences, and the number of people will be allocated to certain committees across the whip. But I do think that, back to Michael's rubbish, if your local councillor is passionate about it, but the person appointed for street cleaning by the cabinet, for a cabinet member by the mayor, isn't, you don't have nearly as much say as if you are a part of the committee system and you can go in there. And what you do is lobby other councillors. The way you get chosen to be a leader or a committee councillor is to lobby other councillors. Of course, there's lots of trading going on, but you do it on your merits. And, I served as a councillor a long, long while ago. And luckily it was the committee system, because I couldn't have stood the mayoral system, I have to say. But everybody is allowed to put themselves forward, right? But you have to get a majority vote to be put forward. And I've seen people sacked for incompetence, even though everybody loves them, even though they're part of a cabal, because it's a secret vote and people judge you on what you achieve. We cannot do that with a mayor and a committee system. You get this one selection once every 4 or 5 years, and it's done almost, it's behind closed doors, and you can't do anything about it once you've got them. So please, and I'm very happy to talk to anybody individually about this, because I'm rather passionate about it. I was 20 years ago and I still am, so happy to talk to anybody. Okay.
Thanks very much indeed. And point well put there. Animal, do you want to take up some of the points that have been made?
I don't want to take the thunder away from Liz. So I'm going to do my best of not doing that. But I've been listening to some of the points, and I want to address at least 4 points that has been made, if I'm allowed, through the chair and with the blessing of Liz as well. It's been raised, the point about corruption. Let's go backwards. From last to backwards. So there's a point raised about corruption being everywhere. And I think Lewis makes a point about that mayoral system is more transparent, apparently, when it comes to corruption. Well, actually, I beg to differ. Mayoral system is not transparent, because there are cabinets, closed door meetings, and if something's going on behind those closed doors, there's no way of proving that something's happened. There's no one grassing anybody up, meaning, what do you call it? Because we elected officials, one, and then we are in a cabinet. If something dodgy happens inside that cabinet, there is no protection. Protected disclosure doesn't apply. And those who don't understand what protected disclosure is, effectively whistleblowing. If you was an employee and you saw corruption going on, you can go and whistleblow, and you'll have protection. But as an elected councillor, you don't have those protection. And we've had £52 million go into Olympic Stadium. To date, we don't know how that happened. All it appears that it's a bad investment, no proper scrutiny. How did the previous administration came to that decision? We don't know how that happened, right? There was no transparency around that decision. How the money happened, what was the dealing and wheeling, we don't know. There is a thing called commercial privilege also, and because of that commercial privilege, we can't even, we are not allowed to see where the money went, because we tried in the scrutiny committees and we didn't get an effective answer. Now, in a mayoral system, the scrutiny committee scrutinizes most of the time after a decision's been made or policy decision has been agreed by a cabinet. And you'll find that it comes to the scrutiny to look at that paper and after and most of the time I'm talking about, and other times the decision's been made and people don't like it, they have to recall it back to the scrutiny. In a committee system, everything, the scrutiny, everything's taking place there. Before you give out a contract somewhere, if you are doing a contract or whatever decision or bidding or tendering, if you're doing any tendering, that will go for that committee in front of those 9-10 people sitting on that committee in front of the chair and the community representative or resident group, that will form part of that committee will also be scrutinizing those decisions. So in that sense, it's more transparent. Whereas in a cabinet, you don't have that. One cabinet member, executive mayor, and I understand the mayor and this administration has devolved the powers to the cabinet. So which means each of those cabinet members have executive decision-making powers to make the decision. They don't sit in front of a committee to make those decisions. They make that decision discussing it with officers. What arrangement and what they have, we wouldn't know. I'm not saying they are corrupt, this current administration, but if they were to be corrupt, we wouldn't know. But in a scrutiny, in a committee model, there is very transparent. There's too many people involved, and it's going to be very difficult to hide something in such an open and transparent decision-making process. So the corruption point, I think it's easier to be corrupt, more easier to be corrupt under an executive mayoral system with its cabinet model. But it's going to be very difficult to be corrupt under a committee model because of the how open those committees are and the number of people involved. So on that point alone, I mean, logically, it doesn't make sense to say that the executive mayoral system is less corrupt. So let's move away to the next point. I mean, I made the whistleblowing point. Yes, I think Cecile made a point about two campaign groups talking about the committee model, and one campaign group are effectively very annoying, lying through the teeth and coming out with nonsense on their leaflets, effectively sensationalizing this campaign. Maybe for them, it's by all means necessary. I would want to believe, I mean, I would like to go by all means necessary because I believe in the committee system so much that I want it to win, but I'm not sure if I can go below the belt to win it. I don't think I can do that. I can't stomach that. But some people believe they can go below the belt to win it, so fine. But I wouldn't allow that to put me off from voting for a committee system, because if we're talking about factions, faction exists even now, and there are chaos currently. Within the Labour Party politics, there are chaos there. And we've got the executive mayoral system, and that system hasn't been able to do anything about it, right? In terms of factions in Labour group, we have that in the council, we have it now, and there's chaos there in the Labour group in terms of, because it's a, let's say, I mean, people have said it's a one-party state, i.e. all the councillors in Newham are Labour, and the politics of effectively all the politics are happening inside the Labour Party, and these factions are still there. But if we are saying that those troublemakers are going to somehow take over the councils and there's got to be chaos there, I think, let's be realistic, it's going to be far-fetched. Those troublemakers have been around for decades, and they will be around for decades, but they will never get anywhere near the council chambers. Yeah, so using that as a scaremongering tactic by some is wrong. It's misguided. We shouldn't base our decision based upon some troublemakers. We should really look at the models, the system. We should look at the policies, the processes, and make a decision based upon the system. We're talking about there are two systems on the ballot. One is a cabinet system, the other one is a committee system. We need to now look at which system is better, which system is inclusive, which system is transparent, which system is more democratic, and what system, and taking those points into account, and we should make a decision. We shouldn't make a decision based on someone being naughty.
Look, I think you're making some really good points. I feel we're really into the last few minutes of this discussion, and it's just zipped along. The time has sort of gone, but I want to give the floor to some people who haven't had an opportunity to say anything so far. Daniel, you wanted to say something.
I just want to quickly mention the emissions-based parking discussion, which has come up in the chat. I think the history of that is that that was not really deliberated on in the early stages when it should have been. And it kind of became a political crisis, kind of almost, you could argue too late. Was there going to be a massive U-turn or wasn't there at a late stage? And it wasn't good politics. I'm someone who broadly supported the administration, although I did try to feed in, not very effectively, some different aspects to it. But I think actually the learning from all of that was that you needed a much better decision-making process rather than councillors being presented with something that had basically already been decided and then being asked to support it and then seeing a backlash and then trying to react. It wasn't a good policy making development, although it's a policy that has maintained, it's a policy I support, but the history of getting there, I think, demonstrated flaws with not having a more inclusive decision making process.
Thanks. I mean, I think that's really helpful. I mean, I do feel that this session has been really interesting because everyone on the call believes in the maximum amount of democracy, and at the same time, we all recognise that no matter what system we have, it will depend on the level of quality of people who are involved in the process, the attachment to the anti-corruption, anti-cronyism, pro-transparency model of local governance is absolutely essential to make matters work, whether or not it's the mayoral system or it's the committee system. And we know that cronyism and corruption is not wiped out just by introducing a committee system or a mayoral system. That the real point is have we got the right people in the right place? Now, one of the questions is this vote that we're about to have going to be a referendum on the performance of Roxana Fears? One felt some time ago, I remember when the election was taking place that saw Roxana elected, that was very much I felt an election which was being fought on the basis of the performance of the previous mayor, and maybe that was the case. I'm not sure. But the one thing that still concerns me is this question about how do we get traction with the people of Newham around this issue, and how do we get their commitment and support for whatever the council is trying to do. Newham faces an incredible number of challenges in the coming period, and it's going to require commitment from people at the highest level. How are we going to make sure that we get people of quality to be able to sort of take on the responsibility for getting the council to work effectively, whether or not it's the mayoral system or it's the committee system? Will the committee system make it easier to get better people to come in? That's a question. What I'd like to do is, if I can, is ask Elizabeth, unless there's someone who's got something pressing they want to say, is to ask Elizabeth perhaps to answer that question. The election is not about an individual, it's about a system. And if it is about a system, what is it about that system that we must change above all else?
I think that you're right, Aidan, in that one of the key issues is to do with how it is run and who are the people that are doing it, and what is the quality and of the people that are doing it. And actually, I think that we need to change the system and change the culture as well. And I think that the culture can change within a committee system that is cooperative. I loved what John said, that the cooperative working was like a peace, kind of like peace working, that actually when people have responsibility, they can rise to it. If you don't give people responsibility, not only do they not rise to it, but they fight for it. We can work better if we work together, and that's what the committee system will do.
Thank you very much indeed, Elizabeth. I mean, I have to say that that last statement, it seems to me, really, it really sort of sums up the challenge that we face. It seems to me, and in the chat, there's this point that's been made what can we do with the committee system will, when it's dealing with councillors who are not engaging with their electorate. I think one of the really important things, and that's why I was very pleased to be asked to sort of chair this discussion, is to remember that actually it's our community that we serve, and it's our community that in the end we expect to be held accountable to. And therefore, the committee system has been really well articulated in this discussion, and I have to say some very strong arguments have been put. I think all equally strong arguments have been put about the question of the mayoral system is not a lost cause. If you've got the right people in the right posts with the right level of commitment, it can serve the community. It can serve the community well. But I have to say, I found this really interesting because it's helped me understand better the problems that are faced by governance and local governance. But that question of anticipating and working for the community is absolutely essential. So the final thing I want to say is the vote is coming up. Let's get as many people out as possible to vote. I think the one thing that we can do is to show that we really believe in the process of voting. If we have an opportunity to vote, let's bloody well do it. So let's talk to our friends, talk to people, talk to neighbors, make sure that they get out to vote, because I think with the commitment that's been shown in this discussion, I think whatever the result is, I think Newham will have a pretty good future in terms of good governance for the coming period if we have this level of commitment and attachment to values. So really, thank you all very, very much indeed. I'm sorry if there are people who wanted to get in on the conversation. There are some good things being said in the chat. I think one of the things we can do is to save the chat and perhaps find a way of reporting on this meeting and what's been said, because I think it's been extremely valuable as a process of consultation anyway. So we're over our time, and I just want to thank you very much, Elizabeth, for taking on the mantle of putting the arguments. Thank you, Animal, for sort of stepping down, but making sure you got the opportunity to put your point across as well. Thanks to everyone who's been able to have their say. And Josephine, thank you very much. Perhaps I can give you the last word, because you've hosted the meeting and you've managed to keep it all together. Thank you all very much indeed. Josephine, over to you.
Yes, and I just wanted to come in and say thank you, Aidan, for being such a fantastic chair, because I think you really did a great job of bringing everyone's voices in and really making sure that we had a lively debate, and a debate that really brought in so many different perspectives. So I really appreciate everyone who turned up here tonight, and I hope you'll all be active in getting to the polls and encouraging everyone else to go to the polls on Thursday to make sure that whatever system is successful at the referendum, it's one that's got a really strong endorsement from the voters of Newham.
Thanks very much, everybody. Good night. Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.